To actually start us off this morning, before I even get into my part, we had a special song that's going to be coming from our third graders who are in the crowd. So we're going to just ask that our third graders please stand where you are. Miss Milan, take them away. So again, good morning and welcome. We'd like to thank all of you for being here with us on this special threefold celebration. I'd like to recognize a few of our guests, including our superintendent, Dr. Emery, our school board members, and our city council representative for coming out today. But above all else, I would like to also thank our community and our parents for being here with us today. You all are what makes Speas such an amazing place. We are celebrating 3 items today. We celebrate our authorization as an International Baccalaureate Primary Years program, and shortly Ms. Jacober will speak to what this means for Speas and how we accomplish this task. We are home to staff from 21 different countries. We embrace our differences and we celebrate those. And that's a part of what today is. We also recognize that we are in the 60th year of Speas Elementary School. Speas was built on the Reynolds Polo Fields and has seen our campus grow throughout the years. From adding the back building to the remodeling in 2010, and with our continuing additions of the pod and the trailers, our school has become a blooming hub of learning and diversity. And finally, we recognize that today is the birthday of our namesake, Wesley B. Speas. Wesley B. Speas was born in 1875. He was a teacher and a principal at Vienna and Louisville, and he became superintendent at the age of 28. He would serve as superintendent for 20 years, from 1903 to 1923. And during his time, he oversaw the merger of Winston and Salem into what we now have today as Winston-Salem. And I jokingly challenge our superintendent and our assistant superintendents, because he would walk his district to go to his schools every day and visit them, walking around, whether it was snow or mud or any of the other conditions, because that was his only way of getting around. But I must say, I've had the pleasure of serving at Speas Global Elementary School, and this is my 6th year. And in this short time, we've almost doubled our student population, but we've accomplished amazing feats. I look forward to seeing Speas Elementary become a pillar of our community for another 60 years. And I thank you all for letting me be a part of it with you today. With that, I ask Dr. Emery if you would please come up.
Good glorious morning to you. Oh, come on, we're at Speas. Good morning.
Good morning.
There we go. I think Principal Ash had this outside so we all could sport the Speas wear today and staying warm. But I thank you all for being here, and it's a delight to be with you. As I was thinking about this week of gratitude, it just seems so appropriate to be with you and to say thank you. Thank you to all of you who are in leadership positions, who are here this morning and support this wonderful school and community. We know that success here rests with all the many hands that support children in this work. I also want to say again, thank you to parents who just so joyfully come here all the time for whatever activity or whatever work is needed, whatever children need. Parents are here for them. Thank you, staff. You come here because you want to be here. You have passion. We can go in any classroom and see that commitment and love that you have for the work. And thank you, leaders. I think Bobby Ash, in a quiet way, has transformed this school and made it a place that all folks want to be. And it's such a great representation of our schools, of our community, and of how we want our world to be. And so I just want to say thank you this morning for inviting us and allowing us to be a part of this tremendous celebration. We know great things are in store through IB. I also want to tell Principal Ash that I won't be walking every day, all 81 sites, even though that it might be a great way to spend your job, right? It would take an entire school year to walk probably all those schools. But we do enjoy visiting here and seeing all the exciting things that are going on for children. And last but certainly most important, I want to say to kids here today, all of you, thank you so much for modeling for adults how we ought to live our lives every day. By the way you care for and love each other, we can learn so much from you. And so thank you for what you mean to us.
If our second grade performers could come up to the front, please.
Hoy vamos a bailar un baile de México llamado la raspa. We will be dancing a dance called la raspa. It is a traditional Mexican dance.
What are you giving to them? Keep them fruit and things, and that's also definitely we make her drink 2 orange juice.
I called the pediatrician and they told me to do it in for medicine. Just a lot of liquid. And what I'm doing is honey, garlic, and onion.
Hoy vamos a cantar una canción de Colombia, se llama Colombia Querrá Querida. Today we're gonna sing a song about Colombia and it's called Colombia Querrá Querida.
Colombia, tierra querida, himno de fe y armonía. Cantemos, cantemos todos, grito de paz y alegría. Vivemos, siempre vivemos a nuestra patria querida. Su suelo es una oración y es un canto de la vida. Su suelo es una oración y es un canto de la vida. Cantando, cantando yo viviré. Colombia, tierra querida. Cantando, cantando yo viviré. Colombia, tierra querida. Colombia te hiciste grande con el furor de tu gloria. La América toda canta la floración de tu historia. Vivemos, siempre vivemos a nuestra patria querida. Su suelo es una oración y es un canto de la vida. Su suelo es una oración y es un canto de la vida. Cantando, cantando yo viviré. Colombia, tierra querida. Cantando, cantando yo viviré. Colombia, tierra querida.
At this time, we would like to invite up Mr. Phil Archer, who is with the Ronaldo House Museum of American Art. He's going to speak a little bit about the history that led to SPEAS, and we appreciate him coming out. For those that don't know, we were actually also just recently marked as a historical marker for the city of Winston-Salem for our polo fields, and so he's going to speak a little bit about all of that. So thank you, Mr. Archer.
Good morning. Buenos dias. Thank you, Principal Ash and Dr. Emery, and thank you, children, for sharing your wonderful talents, musical and dancing talents with us today. I did not go to school at Speas, but I did go to school on Polo Road. I came to Winston-Salem to attend Wake Forest, and I lived for 3 years on Polo Road without having the least awareness of why this street was called Polo, stretching through this part of Winston-Salem. And it's interesting that what has become of this part of the former Rinalda estate is a global elementary school, now an international baccalaureate school. But what was once played here was one of the most global of all sports, polo. And I'm not a polo player, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about what it was like just about 100 years ago out on these fields around us. The Rinalda estate was the home of R.J. and Catherine Reynolds. It was a farm of over 1,000 acres. So we're standing now at the western end of what was Rinalda. On the east, it went over to University Parkway. On the south, down to Stratford Road, which was then called Lover's Lane, which I think we ought to bring back at some point. And then north up past Wake Forest. What's now become Wake Forest University, Speas Elementary, many other entities, was at some point one huge, big, green farm. Rinalda was built in the 19-teens outside Winston-Salem. When R.J. Reynolds arrived in Winston-Salem in 1874, it boasted 443 citizens. And by the time he died in 1918, it had grown 90-fold, 90 times in size, to become the largest city in North Carolina. He was drawn here because his sisters had gone to Salem College, because Winston was close to the the train lines, and because it was in the center of some of the best land for growing tobacco in the country. What Rinalda was conceived of was really a place to teach the people of the Piedmont about agriculture and about diversifying what we ate in the Piedmont. And this was really the dream of Catherine. I'm trying to see if I'm on the right slide. Catherine, who was RJ's wife. And she was quite an unusual woman in this period. She was college educated. She was a businesswoman. She was a visionary when many women a century plus ago, and she was almost Wesley B's contemporary. She's born a few years after Mr. Speas. Most women of her day followed traditional roles in support of their husband, but Catherine was a concerned civic leader. She wanted to improve education. She wanted to do what she could to help agriculture to develop and to become more scientific. And in her short life, she was appointed by President Wilson and his administration to a number of different committees, and she really became a leader in the state of North Carolina. At Rinalda, she developed a place, a sort of extension service to teach farming. And she grew cows, and they raised hogs and sheep and hundreds of kinds of vegetables. They had turkeys and chickens, every kind of an animal you could imagine. And it was a model farm, and people came from around the country to see how they created milk and how they grew their vegetables. Sadly, R.J. Reynolds died in 1918, just 7 months after the family moved into the Rinalda house. While mourning the loss of her husband, Catherine began to travel with her children. They went to Atlantic City, they went to Florida. There are interesting letters in the archives at Rinalda to the American Automobile Association, what we call AAA, in which they tell her and her chauffeur how to get around highways or roadways, because it was actually before we had a highway system. And if a road was out, they would have to divert and go around another town. And Catherine's daughter Mary remembers that there weren't really pit stops or gas stations, so what the Reynolds family did was take a bucket along and use the bucket in the car when they needed to, and out the window it went. So it was a can-do attitude a century plus ago. Catherine developed schools on the Rinalda estate And there was a school right in Ronaldo Village. As you drive into the village, the building on the left was a school that grew to have 150 children. So we're about 750 children strong today. So maybe around a quarter of this number of students actually went to school right in Ronaldo Village. And the principal traveled with Catherine as she was considering developing the R.J. Reynolds High School. So do you know the high school over on Hawthorne and near Ronaldo Road? That was something that Catherine wanted to do for the city of Winston-Salem. So she purchased land and she hired her architect to design plans for that school. And she built an auditorium in memory of her first husband, R.J. Reynolds. While traveling through the Northeast looking at other high school plans, she took her principal from Ronaldo School along, and while traveling, they fell in love and would marry in 1921. This principal was named Edward Johnston, and Edward was a veteran of World War I. So the polo story in America is partly tied to the story of war. It was found that playing polo was the best training possible for cavalry officers. So imagine taking a frozen hot dog, putting it on the end of a stick, and trying to hit a wooden baseball down a football field that's actually 3 lengths of an ordinary football field, and try doing that all while riding a horse. That's what polo calls for. So the kind of bond that it creates between the rider and the horse, and the kind of teamwork that it leads to between the different riders, was found by a lot of generals to be the best kind of training actually for soldiers. So quite a few troops returned from World War I and continued to play polo. At Ronaldo, Catherine, as a sort of gift to her second husband, converted land all around us. It was the equivalent of about 34 football fields to a complex with competition size fields, practice fields so that the riders could train their ponies. There were stables all around us. And this sport of polo actually goes all the way back more than 2,500 years ago. So I see that we have flags on our crowns. Does anybody have flags for Iran? Does anybody have flags for India? Or China? Or Japan? Oh, I see lots of them. So the sport started in Central Asia, around what's now Iran. And it moved east to Japan and China. It spread to India. And for a time, through the 19th century, you may have learned that the British controlled all of India. And in that time, the British learned to play polo. And it was at first a sport for kings and for noblemen and for military officers. And it's interesting to note, if you look at the old ivory paintings and silk paintings, women played the sport as well in ancient times. The ideal polo pony has speed, stamina, and agility. The pony has to sense when the rider wants to move this way or that way for the ball, or in some kind of strategy to move ahead in the field. So in a sort of miraculous way, the pony and the rider become one. The head was made of hard elm. The shaft of the mallet was bamboo. The ball was usually the hard part of the bamboo. And the ponies at Ronaldo were thoroughbreds mixed with quarter horses. So we have some civic leaders here today. I would mention that the players at Ronaldo included the mayor of Winston-Salem, James Haynes, who was then president of the Haynes Hosiery Company. It included Thurman Chatham, who for many years would sit in the House of Representatives in Washington, D.C., and he was president of Chatham Manufacturing, which was the largest maker of blankets in the world. The team included Benjamin Bernard, who would marry Natalie Gray and move into Grayland. I mentioned Edward Johnston, who was married to Mrs. Reynolds. So the husband of Mrs. Reynolds at Ronaldo and the husband of Mrs. Gray at Grayland were both on the team. Catherine Reynolds' architect, Charles Barton Keene, played polo. And a man from Connecticut named Mr. Slowcock was the clubhouse manager, and he lived in the White House that's right behind us. So there's a White House on Polo Road, and it has two faces. One face is directed toward Polo Road, and the other is directed toward the school. The face on Polo Road was where the Slowcock family would enter their house, and the face that's facing the school is where the players could enter a clubhouse. So the players could have recreation after a game and not interrupt Mrs. Slowcock as she was cooking dinner in the other half of the house. And that house remains there. The Winston-Salem polo team that developed at Ronalda would attract as many as 3,000 people to their matches. The very first match had a group of honored guests, and those were the orphans at the children's home. So Mrs. Reynolds invited all of the orphans from the children's home to our match right here, and then they ate dinner in the formal gardens at Ronalda that you drive by on Ronalda Road. The team would play against Pinehurst, Baltimore, Atlanta. The state champions were actually Pinehurst, and Winston-Salem beat them in 1923. That was big news. The team played against Charlotte. The team played against Harvard University. Young Smith Reynolds sold lemonade. We see little photographs of him running around selling lemonade at the age of 5 or 6. His brother Dick briefly joined the team. Catherine would die in 1924, quite young, at the age of only 43, leaving 4 orphans, her children with R.J. Reynolds, and then 1 newborn child that she had with Edward Johnston. She actually passed away in childbirth. Mr. Johnston would create a memorial for Catherine behind the Ronalda Presbyterian Church. In several years, her daughter Mary would buy the shares of the estate from her siblings. And Mary's goal was really to preserve as much of Ronalda as possible and keep it green. So Mary and her husband Charlie invited Wake Forest to relocate 80 miles to the west of its campus, and ultimately gave over 600 acres. And then they also thought to invite the Winston-Salem Forsyth County school system to develop an elementary school on this land. So in Ronalda we have several deeds. Charlie Babcock signed a deed giving half of this land for $1 to the school system. And then a foundation created for Mary Reynolds Babcock sold the other half for $41,000. So Dr. Emery, I know we'd love to have those prices today to buy land. And I think that it would be especially pleasing to Catherine Reynolds to know not only that this land was devoted to education, but that it was devoted to developing global awareness and global understanding. I think that was a key goal that she had for Winston-Salem and that she had for the state of North Carolina. So I hope that seeing the marker on Ronalda Road, I appreciate Principal Ash's assistance in getting that set up and the city of Winston-Salem in erecting it. I hope it gives us a sense that this has always been a fun place where people have played games, and it's also been a place where people have been learning for well nigh 120 years now. Thank you very much, and congratulations, Spees.
Thank you, Mr. Archer. At this time, we're going to have our kindergartners do a quick performance for us. If they'll come up front.
A mi perro Chocolo le gusta bailar, pero aún no decide qué ritmo escogerá. A mi perro Chocolo le gusta bailar, pero aún no decide qué ritmo escogerá.
La cumbia.
A gozar, a gozar. Llegó la cumbia de Perro Chocolo. A gozar, a gozar. A mi perro Chocolo le gusta bailar, mover la colita y vacilar.
A mi perro Chocolo le gusta bailar, pero aún no decide qué ritmo escogerá.
¡Pascuense!
A mi perro Chocolo le gusta bailar, pero aún no decide qué ritmo escogerá.
¡El twist!
A mi perro Chocolo le gusta bailar. A mi perro Chocolo le gusta bailar. A mi perro Chocolo le gusta bailar. Le gusta bailar, le gusta bailar. Baila Chocolito, baila Chocolito, baila Chocolito.
A mi perro Chocolo le gusta bailar, pero aún no decide qué ritmo escogerá.
¡Guaracha!
Aquí viene el Chocolo que le gusta bailar. Aquí viene el Chocolo que le gusta bailar. Miren el perro lindo, mírenlo cómo baila. Aquí viene el Chocolo que le gusta bailar.
A mi perro Chocolo le gusta bailar, pero aún no decide qué ritmo escogerá.
¡Hip hop!
A mi perro Chocolo le gusta bailar. A mi perro Chocolo le gusta bailar. Bailar. Le gusta bailar. A mi perro Chocolo le gusta bailar. A mi perro Chocolo le gusta bailar. Bailar. Bailar.
A mi perro Chocolo le gusta bailar, pero aún no decide qué ritmo escogerá.
¡Vals chilote!
Ese perro Chocolo bueno para bailar, señor.
Pero mira cómo mueve la patita atrás, Chocolito.
Y Chocolo, pues, a ver,
Mira, condenado, como baila la pata.
Ese perro Chocolo bueno para bailar.
Sacaron de coco.
Thank you so much to our kindergarten students and to all of our students who performed this morning. I really appreciate it. Yes, let's give them another round of applause. Thank you guys so much. And thank you to our teachers who are so willing to always get our kids to do something so fabulous for us, and to our parents who cart them everywhere to perform as well. These were basically our performances that we had this past weekend at the Magnet Fair, and so we thought, oh, well, they're already practiced stuff. We'll have them perform this morning as well. So, my part this morning, is I want to share some thank you notes this morning for people who have helped us through this journey. I just want to share a few words of gratitude, and because becoming an authorized IB World School is a huge milestone in the history of any IB World School, and I'm happy to celebrate this accomplishment this morning with you all. This is a time in our school's history, and it's such a lovely moment to pause and to reflect on where our school has been in its long history. And it's a time to celebrate where we are right now and to feel our accomplishments and all the endeavors that we've taken on. And it's also a nice time for us to form our next steps and check back in with our strengths and our areas for our growth, and to continue on this journey. First, I want to thank our SPEAS staff friends who jumped into this IB journey, and they probably didn't know what they were getting into, but you guys might not have known it then, but you were being risk takers, which is one of our IB learner profile attributes. Our teachers and staff really are the ones who daily make the PYP happen in their classrooms and here at SPEAS, and your enthusiasm is what's the driving force behind IB and what's making it successful and work here. All right, students, I need your help. I need you guys to look at your teachers and your assistants and our specialists. I want you to look at them and tell them thank you. I want to send out a thank you to Dr. Emery and our Board of Education. Okay, that's good enough for now. You can tell them thank you again when you go back to class. Open the can of worms on that one, right? I want to thank Dr. Emery and the Board of Education members, especially you guys that are here, for selecting SPEAS to become the place where the primary years would find its home here in Forsyth County. Being a global schools network, School IB was the natural next step for SPEAS, and it was the next step for SPEAS to go further in its inquiry-based learning and international learning. And we're happy to have it here and for helping us to go beyond where we were. So SPEAS B's students, I would like for you guys to give a big wave over here to Dr. Emery and our Board of Education members, because we want to thank them for choosing us to be IB. Then I also want to thank Mr. Ash, there he is, because he brought me along for this ride. I was with him at Ashley and then left there when he left there as well. Went somewhere else, and then he brought me back in so that we could start this journey again here. And as we became more knowledgeable as a school about how to innovate and reflect and improve our teaching practices, he understood how this was going to be a long process and gave us time to weave in the North Carolina standards and put those into our 6 transdisciplinary themes, and advocated for time for us to be together as grade levels and do all the things that needed to be done so that we could be PYP as much as we could be. So give Mr. Ash a round of applause for helping us with all of that. I also want to thank our parents and families and all of our community members who have entrusted your children to us to inspire, challenge, grow, and celebrate. Whatever reason brought you to our school, we hope that our unique community of learners will encourage you to stay and spread the word about about the amazing things that happen here every day. SPEAS B's, I need your help again to wave to a mom or a dad, or your mom or a dad, or any community member here today. Just wave them a thank you wave. We can't do it without you.
She doesn't seem.
And lastly, I want to thank my mom, who was the original risk taker and a model of an internationally minded person. She was a young Canadian bride who left her country to come start her life with my dad in America. And I guess I also have to thank my grandparents, who modeled how to let her go on her adventure, so that when I came home from work one day in June of 2008 and announced that I got a job in China to teach kindergarten at an international school. Oh, and I'm moving in August. Oh, and by the way, I have to renew my passport and get a Chinese visa. My mom supported my crazy adventure because, after all, she'd kind of done the same thing. So, Mom, thank you for allowing me to have my adventure. And everybody just humor me for a second and blow my mom a kiss. Teaching in Shanghai was my first IB school experience, and I loved it right away. I loved the structure of the day, the focus on inquiry and the hands-on learning that I could do with my students there. However, what struck me the most was the community of internationally minded learners. It was the first time where I was surrounded by lots of people who were away from their home cultures, and they were excited to learn about Chinese culture and cultures from which everyone else claimed as their home country. Being raised by a Canadian mother, I often struggled to find the right words to use, and even though both countries spoke English, in that international community, finally, I wasn't the only person who had different words for things. When I was little, I used to ask for the pencil crayons, and people would look at me funny because in America, they're colored pencils. I struggled often to figure out if I was supposed to ask to use the washroom, the bathroom, or the restroom, or if I was supposed to say, can I have a napkin or a serviette? I grew up in a small community in Michigan, and I got a lot of funny looks and laughter when I used the wrong word. It was a constant source of stress in my younger years, and that was just Canada to the US. And I just think about how much more diverse our country is now, and I don't want any child to feel like that. I don't want our SPES children to feel like that. And being an IB school, we subscribe to the IB's mission, and parts of it really speak to this exact point. The International Baccalaureate aims to develop inquiring, knowledgeable, and caring young people who help create a better, more peaceful world through intercultural understanding and respect. It goes on to say, these programs encourage students across the world to become active, compassionate, and lifelong learners who understand that other people with their differences can also be right. What a difference that last line would have made in my formative years. Gives me hope now for our children as we teach them to be inquirers, knowledgeable, thinkers, communicators, principled, open-minded, caring, risk-takers, balanced, and reflective. SPES and our learning community, if you are working towards being all of these attributes of the IB learner profile, raise your hand and give yourself a pat on the back. Let's do this together. I'd like to invite the students who have artwork that you worked on with Mr. King to bring those forward and just kind of come line up here. I think he said they're mostly third graders. Yeah, face that way. So this artwork was done as part of a unit that they do in third grade. It's under the transdisciplinary theme, how we organize ourselves. And the central idea is entrepreneurs enhance the global economy. And these portraits happen to be of Wesley B. That was a photo that we found from the Time Traveler Internet. And so these are their renditions of Wesley B. And I thought bringing them up so that they could show them off would be the perfect opportunity for us to sing Happy Birthday to Mr. Spees. So I'll start you off and then I'll back up because nobody wants to hear that the whole way through from me. So ready? 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Mr. Spees. Happy birthday to you. Thank you, Mr. King, for these beautiful pieces of art.
So with that, we would like to close today's special ceremony recognizing the start of our IB journey. We know in today's world that being a part of the greater global culture is what will make our future stronger. And SPES provides a small part of that future. As part of celebrating our 60 years today, we want to acknowledge our past, but then also be able to look towards our future. SPES was once a cornerstone of the community, and today we renew our vision to be a hub of the community and to again be a school of excellence. I would challenge anyone to find better teachers and staff than sit before you. Speas has one main goal, and that is to be the best school in our district. And I would say we are on our way there because of our staff, students, parents, and community. You all make Speas Global Elementary the place to be. And I dare say Wesley B. Speas would be proud. Students, we wanted to let you know that we will have a special treat for each of you at lunch today. And it involves food, which is always our favorite. For our guests, parents, and community members, we ask that you please join us for some refreshments celebrating today in our media center if you have the time. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, students. Everyone have a wonderful day and have a wonderful holiday break. Please be safe. Thank you.
Thank you.